Hi, my name is Ava Sharon, and for my history capstone project, I'll be talking about Aristotle's impact on the modern world. So, my main argument is that even though Aristotle lived a really long time ago, over 2,000 years ago, everything that he taught and expressed is still very relevant into how we act today as a society. So, Aristotle covered a wide variety of topics in his time of living and teaching. And first, I'll start with science and logic. So, Aristotle combined logic with evidence to better understand the world instead of relying on myths or supernatural explanations. And he believed that using reasoning and observation would actually get things figured out. This in turn helped shift thinking away from storytelling towards actual investigation. He also laid the foundation for the scientific method. I don't mean that he actually invented it, but his insistence on observation, classification, and logical reasoning really influenced how science later developed. And many of those ideas are pillars now in the scientific method. Um, Despite what researchers may claim, Aristotle did actually perform experiments. He did biological studies, he dissected animals, and he observed nature closely. Cambridge University has actually defended this thought and basically argued that calling him non experimental really overlooked how experimental he actually was. He also helped establish the idea of rational science. He believed that everything in nature had a purpose, and with studying it carefully, can we actually understand it rather than just relying on fate or the gods. This leads into the idea of him replacing superstition with reasoning. His way of thinking really helped people look for real and practical causes for things rather than just assuming that things happen for a more divine reason. And this mindset still shapes how we approach science and critical thinking now. On to politics. In his work in politics, he identified and analyzed a variety of government forms, such as monarchies and aristocracies. He distinguished between good forms of governments, which serve common interest, and bad forms, which just serve the selfish rulers. And this ties into how he strongly criticized tyranny. He saw it as very dangerous and an unstable form of ruling. He thought that it was based off of fear and of power and not justice or what was best for the people. He also argued that monarchies were illogical and risky. He wasn't against it entirely, but he did believe that it was flawed and it relied too heavily on one ruler. Like, if the ruler was corrupt, then the entire system in itself would be corrupt. He also believed in a strong middle class. He believed that it was an essential part for a stable government. He thought that when power is too heavily concentrated on the very rich or the very poor, it leads to conflict. And a strong middle class keeps the government balanced and fair. He also supported broad citizen participation. He didn't exactly believe that everyone should rule equally, but he did support the idea that citizens should be involved in, the everyday decision making. He saw it as a way to protect justice and prevent an abuse of power from occurring, which has now influenced the modern democracies today. For education, Aristotle believed that the purpose of education was to build virtue and character. Education wasn't just about gaining knowledge, but about shaping moral and ethical people. He thought that character development, he thought that was the foundation for a good life and a good society. He believed that learning should be active and not passive. He believed that students do best by doing, so instead of just listening or memorizing, engaging with the material is better for comprehension, which is an idea that is still essential to, modern teaching strategies. He also emphasized teaching good habits from an early age. He said that the habits that we form when we're young shape us into who we become. So children should be taught things like discipline, self-control, just basically things to help them grow into virtuous adults, which is why he saw education as a way to raise responsible citizens. In his view, a well-educated person wasn't just someone who was personally successful, but someone who positively contributed to the community as a whole. He also believed a good education must balance the mind and the body. So he warned against focusing only on intellectual development or only focusing on physical training. He said a complete education should nurture both to produce good individuals. On to ethics. He believed that something good is something that fulfills purpose. He argued that everything has a specific function. So when something performs its function well, it in turn is good. The same thing goes for humans, which their function is to live virtuously. Aristotle also had this idea of eudaimonia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is essentially just human flourishing. He believed that true happiness doesn't come from pleasure, but living a life of moral excellence. He also introduced the concept of phronesis, which is practical wisdom. This is the ability to apply virtue to real life situations. It's not just knowing what's good, but being wise enough to make the right decision based on the context of that situation. This skill is valued today in leadership and also in the world of psychology. He also believed that people aren't born virtuous. To become virtuous, you have to repeatedly practice good behavior. It's not just something that you're born with. And he also believed that ethical behavior is about finding balance. He had a famous concept called the golden mean, which means that virtue lies between the extremes. An example I found while researching was that courage is the balance between being a coward and being reckless. So ethical living is really just about finding that middle ground. Okay, so the importance of this. His influence for education can still be seen today in schools, how schools promote both critical thinking and ethical growth in the curriculums. For foundations, his methods of reasoning and classifications laid the groundwork for modern fields like science, law, and philosophy. For his innovations, he helped build the foundation for critical thinking, which continues to shape how we approach problem solving in education, science, and just everyday life. My personal takeaways. The most unexpected thing I learned while researching this was how many different just areas Aristotle was involved in or that he covered in his time of living. Before researching, I really thought he was just involved in the world of ethics, but he really covered so much more, which I wasn't expecting. How will this inform me? I think it's gonna, make me look at certain things from a more historical perspective, just because, everything obviously does stem from history. I just didn't really realize, the extent to which Aristotle had the effect on, us today. And my favorite thing while researching this was, honestly, just researching everything as a whole. It was, there was just so much to cover. I thought that was really interesting. So many old texts too, which also ties into my least favorite. Trying to comprehend some of those older sources was really difficult. I had to stray away from a few because of how complicated they were. Some of the words weren't really like words that we use today, so it was a little difficult, but I made my way through it. So yeah, that is my history capstone.